Welcome back, everyone, to another AI Minds podcast. This is a podcast where we explore the companies of tomorrow being built AI first. I am your host, Demetrios, and this episode, like every other episode, is brought to you by DeepGram, the #1 speech-to-text and text-to-speech API on the internet today, trusted by the world's top enterprises, conversational AI leaders, and startups. Some of these folks you may have heard of, like Spotify, Twilio, NASA, and Citibank. I have the pleasure of sitting down with Ram, the CTO and co-founder of Sei AI. How you doing, man?
Doing great, dude.
All right. Well, I know you've had quite an illustrious history in the financial space. What were you doing in these first companies? You worked for TransferWise, or Wise as they call it these days. I'm a user of Wise, and I started it back when it was TransferWise. You also worked for a few other financial companies. What were you doing there?
Yeah, it's been a long journey. I graduated sort of in 2009. That's like, yeah, too far back in the history now. Uh, Worked for a couple of companies like Amazon and stuff. Then I wanted to get into financial services. I went to PayPal. As part of the team, this is right about in 2013 ish, 2012, 2013, when PayPal was migrating away from like a big monolith to like microservices. That was all the charm those days, like APIs, right?
Yeah.
As part of a team that built the APIs for peer-to-peer money transfer and helped it launch across the world. So yeah, I was with PayPal for like 3.5 years, and I went to Singapore. After that, I was in TransferWise, where I was part of a team which helped TransferWise launch in Australia and New Zealand. Did a bunch of engineering and product work there, and when yeah, came back to India, started this company.
And when you were at TransferWise, I imagine you didn't get your teeth into something as big of a project as migrating from a monolith to API services.
Yeah, thankfully not, though there were similar issues in TransferWise as well at that point. But as part of this regional team, where the goal is not to undertake massive technology changes, but more of like launching TransferWise in new regions and get the revenue out basically faster.
So you sound like you were on the engineering side of the house.
Yes, mostly engineering, yes.
What made you then decide to try your hand at starting a company?
Yeah, the real reason is probably because I didn't like working for others. I wanted to do something on my own. And I felt that life was kicking by without too much fun happening at work. So I wanted to like try something on my own. I did try out a bunch of ideas before I met my co-founder, Pranay.
How'd you guys meet?
It was complete serendipity. So there is this program called On Deck, which more like uh, folks who are interested in starting companies, like a cohort of sorts, um, cohorts plus like blind dates, if you will, right? So it was all remote. This was during the second wave of COVID, basically. This was in 2021. We both applied to On Deck. We saw each other's intros. I wanted to reach out, but I forgot. Late in the night, I went asleep, but he reached out to me that night. And the next day, we started chatting. And 2 days later, we were still chatting. 5 days later, we were still chatting and like trying to figure out what to do. And then, as we started discussing more ideas, we felt that it's like a natural fit. I'm more like an engineering product guy, versus my co-founder is a lot more on the sales side of things. He has like a MBA from Columbia and stuff. So he has actually worked with Travis Kalanick on his post Uber startup.
Oh, nice.
So
Yeah,
he
the cloud
helped,
kitchens.
yeah, the cloud kitchens. So he helped expand that in like yeah, Middle East and Southeast Asia basically. So our skills were like perfectly like complementing each other. So we started jamming a few ideas. We both wanted to get into YC. The goal was that if we don't get into YC, let's rethink. if we have to do something on our own. And we applied to IC, and yeah, in like a week, we got confirmation that we are both in. This was in July, August 2021. So the batch is supposed to start in the month of Jan 2022, but
Uh-huh.
we got in very early with just an idea, no product, no customers, nothing. So
S
we were building something like a ledger for B2B payments at
Uh-huh.
that point.
Yeah, which makes sense. That was the
Yeah.
space you knew?
Yeah. And in the next 6 months, we got a few customers interested, signed LOIs and stuff. But the more we talked to companies, the more we felt that this was like a push product rather than a pull.
Ooh,
And we didn't get enough conviction on that. And after that, YC happened. We experimented with a bunch of ideas, basically. Like none of them went anywhere. The worst thing that you can probably expect, like not to happen in a startup is you can die, but you have to like know about it soon. The slow death is what is really frustrating. We are having like a bunch of ideas which were just slow death ideas, basically. And yeah, we are like fooling around for like a year and a half, and then GPT happened. Uh, and I have seen some of the problems in regulated financial institutions, right? In PayPal and TransferWise, like compliance is the core of everything that a regulated financial institution has to take care of, whether you're like launching new products or like launching in new countries, whatever, right?
yes.
We try to take a look at complaints in a broad perspective. We talked to, I think, around 50 to 60 chief complaints officers across the world, try to synthesize what are the problems that they have. We nailed about two um core problems that they had, which is also like a easier wedge into building the broader, into building into the broader compliance space, basically. The wedge that we ended up was using AI to solve for marketing compliance. For example, this was in 2023 when CFPB was still there. I mean, it's still there, but Elon Musk might have like different ideas, right? So CFPB was very active, lots of enforcement actions, lots of activity around like
I don't even know what
UDAP.
CFP
Oh,
is, to
CFPB
be
is
honest.
the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which is regulating all the financial institutions. One of the core tenets is that when you're marketing or advertising a financial product,
I
it has
see, yeah.
to, the UDAP is the regulation, basically, like unfair, deceptive acts and practices.
Yeah.
You should not advertise in a way that it's unfair, abusing, or like deceptive to the end consumer, right? So, like tons of enforcement actions that were coming in, and this is like a product built for that particular use case, which is that when you're advertising something on the internet, whether you are a bank or like a banking as a service player or a fintech, you have to be compliant, right?
Yeah.
So we started off with that. Um, we had a few customers there. We always wanted to use this as a wedge into the broader complaints for customer support product, which is when a customer support conversation happens, uh, you as a regulated financial institution, typically you do like quality assurance of all of those calls, emails, chats to ensure that the agents, the customer support agents are like not saying something that is like regulatorily there is a problem, or even your internal policies, anything outside of that is like a big problem, right?
Uh-huh.
Typically in big enterprises, they do sampling. They'll pick like 5 to 10% of the call. 10% is probably on the higher end. What you've heard typically is like 3 to 5% on average of
Yeah,
all the
because
calls
we're
that happen.
talking how many calls are these big financial institutions getting per day? We're talking
One of the
thousands?
customers that we are working with, they spend $100 million in customer support alone. That's like
Holy,
the overall cost on customer support. So obviously there is going to be some X multiple of the number of calls or chats that happen. It's not humanly possible. And this company has like 60 to 70 quality assurance folks whose only responsibility is to like listen to a sample of these calls, chats, or emails, figure out where the agent is like screwing up, right? Uh, Ideal fit for AI. no need for sampling, 100%. Use a tool like DeepGram to like get speech to text, get the text, run it through an LLM, ingest a customer's policy, use RAG, use prompts, fine tune models, whatever. Give them like a report saying that, hey, out of these 100% of all of your calls, 2% have this issue, 3% have some other issue, 5% is where the agent violated this regulation, blah, blah.
Oh, wow.
Right. So we always wanted to use marketing complaints to be a wedge to do the customer support quality assurance, basically. And that's what we did. Mid to late last year, we launched the QA for customer support product. We already work with a bunch of fintechs, a couple of listed companies, and like CDC plus financial institutions are using us, right? But then the interesting thing that we saw is voice AI just dramatically boomed in the last 6 months. I knew that this is going to be hot, but I didn't expect this to be so hot so fast. But the good thing for us is that it sort of positioned us in a nice way to launch like voice AI agents, which we have already launched and working with a few customers. That since we started with the complaints first background, since we started with quality assurance for your human customer support agents, we can ingest your policies, we know like what those regulations are and things like that. It is sort of easy with um, platforms like DeepGram, Eleven Labs, or whatever. It's very easy to build a voice bot, but with a background in complaints, we believe that there is a particular niche of building compliant voice bots and selling to regulated financial institutions only, who would care a lot about not just about cost reduction with bots, but more about is the bot saying things that is like simply not true, or it's about saying things that are like regulatory violations, basically. For example, is the bot using like abusive language or like deceptive practices, whatever, right?
Yeah.
Or it's not displaying or it's not like quoting the disclosures properly. For example, if you're like a real estate, like a mortgage company, there's a bunch of disclosures that you have to like sort of say. So since we have come in from that background versus others who just wanted to build voice AI agents first, and then I can add compliance, which is a valid approach. But for us, since we started with compliance, we have put the right guardrails in place already. It was just very easy using tools like DeepGram and Eleven Labs to build a voice AI agent on top of all of our complaints knowledge and just launch it.
So, what do you think are some unique challenges that you've run into?
On the voice AI side,
Yeah.
on the voice AI side, like I said, it's very easy to. It's true for AI in general. It's very easy to build a POC, get a flashy demo out, but the devil is in the details, right? That's always a challenge. Like, how do we get a POC ready AI app uh, like work great in production? But I'm not particularly worried about that because one on the knowledge side, we have enough knowledge about compliance and like working with companies across like mortgage, buy now pay later, lending and stuff. So we can kind of understand like the patterns of what companies look for in a voice AI agent. And on the platform side, uh, with like I said, companies like DeepGram, Eleven Labs, and stuff, it is very easy, and I can trust DeepGram to sort of handle scale automatically. So some of the typical questions that I used to have as a tech founder, like, can this scale? If I make like 100,000 calls in a day, will it work? Like I'm like 95, 96% sure that it will work because DeepGram is built off of like so many startups, enterprise customers working off, the cloud, the auto scaling, the patterns you would have figured out, and like WebRTC and the real time latency reduction and things like that, right? So I'm like less worried about the tech infra side, but I'm like much more worried about sort of getting the right customers, like growing with them, moving very fast. That's always a challenge. So that's the bigger worry, not anything on the tech.
How do you look at pricing? Because I know that is something that is on founders' minds and also on companies' minds, you want the companies to reach for you like you're a toothbrush, right? That you want to have it be something healthy. But if someone knows that every time they're using you, they're going to get charged per instance or per outcome or per request, then maybe that's going to make them not rely on you as heavily. But on your side, every time you're making a call to an LLM or to DeepGram or to 11 Labs, whatever it is, you're paying for that. So if you're not passing it on to the customer, then you're essentially eating the profit. And I find that can be very confusing for founders to wrestle with.
Yeah. So this is the new age of pricing, right? So with SaaS, typically you charge a fixed fee, or like you charge by the seats or whatever, right? And the marginal cost of serving another user or another set of like scale workloads is very minimal. Versus with AI, it's all variable cost, right? So which makes it tricky to sort of calculate the prices upfront, right?
Uh-huh.
But on the flip side, if you are working with enterprises, right, and if you can expect good enough scale, like you can sort of take multiple approaches. One of the approaches, the simplest approach, is what DeepGram already supports. That we could get into an enterprise plan, and I can deploy it in house. There will still be some variable costs involved, but it's not as variable as like number of calls or the number of minutes of calls that I have
Huh.
like every month. Right? It sort of amortizes the costs.
Yeah.
That is definitely an option. Like deploying the models in house will reduce the amortize. It will amortize the variable cost into fixed cost. But more than that, I think we are also getting into an age of outcome based pricing, which is the number of tickets that I successfully deflect.
Yeah, because that's really what I have heard people compare it against. If you are comparing it against SaaS, then you're inevitably going to be a more expensive option. But if you're comparing it against the time of a human to do that same task, then it's going to be a much cheaper option.
Yeah. The only thing that will matter there is how good uh, your product is in terms of accuracy, right?
Yeah.
That you don't want to do, for example, you don't want to do outcome based pricing if you're not sure that the product performs better than like 95% accuracy, right?
Yes.
So I believe that as models improve with the new age reasoning models, right, the accuracy is sort of like increasing, the costs are also coming down, right? I believe that more and more companies would want to experiment with outcome based pricing, but I also don't know if it is there yet that you can base off of your entire business model. Maybe Sierra can do. They've raised like ton of money. They can afford to experiment, but not a seed stage startup at this point.
Now, when you are getting the agents inside of the companies and they're fielding support questions, how much of the workflows that these agents are doing are deterministic with some LLM calls involved versus the agent has free range and the whole thing is the agent deciding on what it does?
Oh, no. So all of the use cases that we have deployed, it's still not there yet. But I think it'll get there. But all of the use cases that we have deployed is very constrained. You also want that kind of predictability because LLMs by default are like stochastic, right? You cannot predict. Customers, especially the enterprise customers that we are working with, you need to give them predictability. The moment you talk about like probabilistic nature of LLMs, they're already like turned off, right? So the way to get predictability is to pick use cases. Like I know that I will, when I work with a customer, I will look at some of the conversations that they've had in the last few months. I know the patterns of conversations that they typically have. And internally, we have something called AI readiness scorecard, right? Which is that I look at use cases, I look at how the agents respond, and figure out what percentage of the use cases are ready for AI currently, with minimal lift both from our side and our customer side. If you can provide value based on the set of use cases that we handpick, then we provide that value upfront. Obviously, the pricing will be like very small. They are happy. We roll out to 100% of that particular use case. And when it sits outside of the use case, I will deflect to a human. Then I'll pick the next use case in my scorecard,
Yeah,
deal with
okay.
it, get to 100%.
That makes sense. So then you go after the lowest hanging fruit and you get it done. Well, this has been awesome, Ram. I appreciate you coming on here and talking with me about it.